All right. Welcome to another edition of Sabbath Lounge. This is Matt
And Jake here.
and Jake. We're coming to you talking to somebody today. Jake, who are we talking to?
This is Karyn, and we came across her through Debarim Publishing, right? And she has a book out, and we're going to talk to her about that. So Karyn is a wife of 14 years to Drew and a mother of 5. They have recently been given by the father an 1880 farmhouse, which they're slowly restoring, and in Richmond, Virginia, on 5 acres. So that's kind of a little bit about her background, but we're going to let her actually do some of the background talking. So I think my first question will kind of get us going. How's that sound, Matt?
Yep, sounds like a plan.
All right. So now we could do a whole episode on this, but so we'll try to keep it brief. But what is your background, and what was kind of the catalyst that got you into Torah?
Actually, it's fairly recent to be very diligent to pursue that part of the word, just because the word pursued me first back in 2017, I want to say, and he just started teaching me it as the word himself, and because I grew up understanding, like hearing the Bible weekly and actually bi-weekly, but we were part of a conservative Christian group, and I didn't actually the Torah wasn't taught as a something that needed to be obeyed. And after he started teaching me himself, I just becoming more concerned with what he thought, and desiring him and becoming the bride that actually takes care to prepare herself for the groom according to his household rules, and understanding those and why he might desire those things in his bride. Those things became something that I cared to pursue and seek to honor, not for any like religious reasons, because he had already exposed to me just how religion and self-indulgence are just two sides of the same coin. And so I didn't want any part of a movement. I didn't want to be a part of something that just because other people were. So I was trying to be very careful, and I still see some like very sticky situations that come from even Torah observance, just because people can get dogmatic even about that. And so I don't want to be sectarian. I know a lot of really Christians who do desire to know the Lord, and yet religion has really confused a lot of folks to just misunderstand the word himself. And so my desire is to seek to turn people to the heart toward desiring his way, so that he can teach them, and that they would be led by that desire, and not necessarily by the letter of the Torah, because it doesn't start there. As you can see through Pharisees and stuff, it doesn't start necessarily through forcing obedience. It starts through a desire to seek his word.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that's very similar to how my wife and I got started, was, on her end, because she had very similar, she just wanted to be more pure, a more pure bride, and so she did a Woman of God study with my sister, and that kind of evolved into things. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's something that you said that I read, and so it talked about how you kind of came into Torah through food. A lot of people come through different ways. But did I read that right? Is that kind of what you were saying? That's what got you there, was through the food?
Yeah, just he began to instruct me. So he kind of introduced himself as the Word. And so my entrance into, this was before I felt fully convicted on, like the rules for, not the rules, the instructions for his children, on food. But he described to me, what makes the thing truly good is that Abba is offering it, Abba himself. And if he's not, then it's not a good thing. And seeing that, I was just, I wanted to understand. I didn't necessarily have to know why he didn't desire that his children not eat mice. Like, obvious, that's kind of obvious. But we had pigs already, and I was like, I have no interest in eating pigs after watching them. And so those things weren't like, oh, I have to let go of that. That was just not a desire that I had, mostly because my desire for him instructed me to consume according to his word and his desire, and what he called good. Like, it just wasn't there. It wasn't in the scripture. And I wasn't feeling like an affirmation that he had ever called those things good things. And so I used his word, or I received his word as my guideline for what I wanted to consume. And I don't know, it's the other Torah instructions that I had not really perceived as strongly, just because he hadn't laid those other things on my heart. And so only recently have I made relationships with folks who took more seriously, like Shabbat. And actually, he had been speaking to me we had started a homestead, and we were just grinding through the weekends, and we're getting almost nowhere and losing so many livestock, just so much sacrifice, just because we were stubborn, probably. And when I finally released that, and he kept speaking every Saturday, Sabbath, Sabbath, Sabbath. And I was just kind of ignoring it. But then I confronted my own desire to keep my own routine. And I was like, you know what? It's up to me. The woman is really the one who has to prepare for Sabbath. And even if my husband isn't convicted to observe Torah necessarily, because we both had a really Christian upbringing, I can do what I can. And I want to honor Abba by doing that. And so we've started doing that, and it's tricky just because we don't know, our families don't understand why at all, and most of our friends. So like, anyway. But,
yeah, our family doesn't understand either.
yeah. They kind of understand for a minute, and then they kind of forget, and it's hard. It's tough. So, Jake, but at some point I do have some slides I put together. I think we need to go there for a second. Okay. So I'm going to switch off of this, and hopefully this works the way I think it will. We shall see.
I think you got it.
So did we talk about the name of the book? Karyn, what's the name of the book?
Why We Eat.
Why We Eat. So I felt like we needed to make sure that we showed that and had a picture of it. It's a beautiful cover. Did you make the cover?
I did. Yeah.
So
originally it was called something entirely different, and I was pushing and pushing and pushing to get it going, and the Spirit spoke that phrase to me, and I was like, yeah, that's a better word. And yeah, I'm excited about how it turned out, the cover.
Yeah, good. So I'm afraid to move off of it, so I'm going to stay with it. So this is you, and did you say this was your youngest, or? It's
my third, so she's the middle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the season that I was. It was, the word was working in me a lot in that, so it's a very special time. So that's partly why I chose that.
All right, so and we put her bio in here. If you wanted to pause that, you could read in more detail about that. And Debarim Publishing is published the book, and so before you ask your next question. I had this one. So
okay, yeah, go ahead.
So I pulled this as a piece out of so your book. Well, like I Googled you, and that's what we do. And so I think I can show that. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got a website called thisisagoodthing.one, and you have recipes there. And so I went and kind of checked that out, and also Googled you and found, I believe I found you like in Target and all kinds of places selling this book. And I also found online that you have it in ebook form, and this is a section that I pulled online on the ebook form. And so you talked about bread here. And so it says the truth all the adjective bakers aim for is fluffy, air, tender, melt in your mouth, flaky bread was never supposed to be any of those things. So I was kind of curious about what you're saying here. And you go on to talk about how commercial food is a poison. And I truly agree with what you're saying here, and that's something I wanted to hear more about you. Kind of explain this passage here.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I think that was actually on a Instagram post or something, but because the Word just recently spoke it, and it was since the book was published. But it's true, and so most bread that you'll find in the store or in bakeries, they're aiming for a particular product that is very palatable, and it's often sweet because none of the sugars have been eaten by the leaven. And so it rises by a falsehood. It makes itself, it's using commercial leaven. It becomes fluffy without the time and the effect that causes bread to be worthwhile, worth eating. But as they called the bread in ancient times, the staff of life, it was literally what they existed on. And a staff is something that should support your life, support your body. And what I found to be true is that receiving bread as it's made to be is very supportive and very nourishing. But most of what people call bread now is for the pleasure, and because it's separating most of the nourishing components out of that flour to create a lighter and fluffier product that is more appealing. But that is sugar, and it's toxic to your body.
Yeah, and it's something about the difference between simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates, and simple convert into sugar instantly, and and the bread you're talking about has more complex and more sustaining, and it has a direct tie-in clearly to the bread of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he revealed so many different mysteries through just the lengthy process of leavening, of true leavening, and how it not only rises the loaf, but it breaks down the acids that are actually, so those acids will inside of your body. If you take whole grain flour from the store and you buy a whole wheat loaf of bread, you're going to get a fast version of whole grain bread, and it is actually going to rob your body of nutrients because it's not been truly leavened. The leaven, as it works over 12 hours, it actually breaks down the acids on the outside of the grain that protect the grain from sprouting too soon. And if your body receives those things, or if the acids go into your body, they'll act protective inside of there, and they'll start grabbing up minerals and things out of your body and bind them. And so you're actually losing nourishment by eating things that are not truly leavened.
Yeah,
So
I believe that 100%. During this Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I became really convicted that he cared about what I ate even more. I mean, clearly, those of us in Torah, we know that we're supposed to eat clean, but I think that one can argue I don't know that I can argue for sure out of scripture at this point, but I do think an argument can be made that commercial processed food is unclean. I don't think
Yeah.
it's too far of a stretch to say that, and it's hard to admit. It's convenient, it's easy, it's what it's hard to get away from it. But yeah, I think there's some truth with what you're getting at there for sure. I thought it was pretty deep and pretty profound. So do you have another question, or do you want me to stay with what I was doing?
No, I have some more questions. That one, I have one that'll tie kind of into that, I think.
Okay.
So, recently my wife's been into making bread and from, grinding her own wheat berries and all that stuff. And, so she's learned a lot about actual bread and how much better it is for you, and, what actually the bread of life is. You could actually just live on bread when it's whole like that. But you said an interesting thing in one of the write-ups you sent us about a comparison between what's been done with bread and what was done to Messiah on our behalf. And I just wanted to see if you could kind of elaborate on that. You kind of mentioned what happened with the bread. Can you tie that into Messiah?
So I believe that the enemy has wanted to disintegrate bread from its purpose, so that suspicion would arise for like Christ calling him, or the Messiah calling himself the bread of life. Because if everybody's fearful of bread, then why would we want to trust someone who calls himself the bread of life, right? And so he's done a lot of damage to the reputation of bread through its disintegration, and he plagiarizes things.
Yeah.
And so when he plagiarizes things, he wants to install his own software and initiate doubt in something that's truly good, so that he can steal from the Father, because that's his main goal, is to take away something that's precious to the Lord. And so that's how I kind of tie it in, is that he wants to destroy the reputation of what the Lord calls good, so that we would distrust, for one thing, his word, which is Yeshua. And also because like so many people don't even believe that the Lord knows what he's talking about when he says, bread is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And so when you initiate doubt and milk and things like that are truly good things, people are fearful of now.
Yeah, the way it's been counterfeited, like you said, and plagiarized into now people are, quote unquote, allergic to bread, and it's I hadn't even thought about using it as a way to point you away from the idea that Messiah is the bread of life. And well, bread can't sustain you, so why? And here it's talking about being sustained by it.
I think also, if you think of Christianity in the same way, like you've got disintegrated word being used in churches, and that turns people away from, it's making them sick and it's making them deconstruct. And they're saying, oh, the bread, Jesus is not the way. Well, that's because you don't know Yeshua. Right. Maybe it's because you don't know the actual word. And, you're hearing it filtered down through so many different theologies and doctrines, and not actual receiving full bread.
Right. You're essentially following another Messiah at that point.
Yeah. That's well said. Excellent.
I had a couple more questions.
Maybe you just stay with
maybe one more, and then we can go back to the. Okay. This kind of ties in, I think. So one of the things that you said was, "I simply want to consume what God has authored," and I think that's quite profound, and yet it's a very simple concept. And I think I'm kind of right there with you, I think. So I'll have you kind of elaborate on that. But I think too often we get caught up in, the teachings of man and putting our own ideas into what Scripture's really trying to say, right? And then when really we just need to let it speak for itself and not water it down, not corrupt it. So is that kind of the idea you're trying to convey with that statement? And then can you just elaborate on the point there?
Yeah, in both cases, whether it's food or the word itself or himself, you would want to not get a disintegrated form, right? The best thing that you can receive is from the Father's hand. And he made a distinction several years ago between taking and receiving. And the very first thing that happened in the garden was she took something that was not being offered to her. And so the word that has made a distinction for me about food, in that if it's being offered by the Father, I can receive it. But if I'm taking it for myself, like even if it's a healthy food, I can still take, just because he's always offering what is truly good at any given time. And so sometimes as we pursue, scripture plans, or we're like, I want to do this my way, we're not going to have our ears open to receiving and I say consuming, but consuming is such an interesting word to me. I really like the word receiving. But when I say consuming, I would say that I'm speaking about food in general, because I'm putting it in to my body consciously. And as the word speaks, I receive that, but I'm not like, I'm going to go take that scripture and do what I want with it. So it's like, it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to make a distinction. So like I'm not sure.
You can consume it, but you have to receive it after you've consumed it, or it doesn't really manifest.
Right.
Well, I think in the word consume, I mean, it ends in me. And so, I mean, it is more me-centered. And when you receive, somebody is, generally if you receive a gift, not that has to be someone in power, but if you're receiving it, you're not in the position of power, if that makes sense.
It's something being offered.
Yeah.
But he gives us this authority to put something into our own mouth, and that's what he gave to Adam and Eve. And they betrayed him, because they consumed something that he said that he did not offer. And so as I think about what I'm consuming physically, it reminds me, and I think that Yeshua hinted at this. He says, as often as you do this, I really think that if we consider, as we're consuming, that our bodies belong to him, that our energy is for the purpose of glorifying him and submitting to him and honoring him, then we can't just consume for our own will and our own pleasure. And he does offer pleasure, but he also showed me that, like, if you separate pleasure from his true goodness, then you're going to be chasing nothing. You're chasing shadows, because pleasure without fullness is nothing. So anyway.
So that's the kind of the why, is you're eating in order to have the energy to carry out his will, then essentially.
Yeah, very well said.
And then let's see, my last question can wait till the end.
Okay, so we will go back over to this, and we kind of had it frozen there for a second. And if I can, there we go. Now it's moving. So you pulled this section as well, and it kind of goes along with, you put some scriptures here, and one of the things you wrote here is white identity does a good thing carry. The word called each food good. His character traits present in his creation echo his word. Food itself is a word from the mouth of God. So maybe explain that a little bit, and then you have some scriptures there.
I'm having to open mine because it's hard to see. It's small. No, it's okay. I'm not on the right page. Oh, there it is. So when he initially gave me this phrase, "This is a good thing," I didn't realize how many times it was in the scriptures. It's everywhere, but I started to realize that was a phrase that he gave to many, many people. And as I identified that what was being offered by the Father is always truly good, the identity characteristics of a thing itself, it must be carried by something he's offering, right? He's truly good. He is good in nature, and there is no unrighteousness in him. There is no lie in him. And so everything that he has authored for our good carries his character traits. And when I heard the Shema, and I didn't even know it was called that at the time, I kept hearing one. Yahweh, your God, is one. That really made an impact, because he was showing me as I was milling my grain that if you take a part off of something, it's a robbery. You're separating something from itself. And he actually showed me, like, as I was separating my mind from my motherhood through my phone, that was also separating myself from myself. And disintegration is death. And so when he showed me that, I was like, okay, the nature of oneness or completeness is present in what he calls good. And that kind of gave new meaning to where Yeshua is saying, I and my Father are one. And it's a completeness statement. And anyway, so as I went down through just the ways that he identifies what is truly good for our bodies, it can't hold a lie in it because he doesn't lie. It has to carry life because he is life. He offers life. The light that something absorbs as it grows, it actually has an impact in the body. And the further you get from that state of completeness, the more light that is, that characteristic of light and life in that item, in that food is lost. So it has less capacity to offer satiety, is the word he used, fullness, and the substance. So like the shadow versus substance thing popped up for me is something that is not offering fullness. You have to keep consuming it. It's a shadow. It's like you're chasing something that can't fill you. So substantial things can fill you to the degree that you don't keep having to eat more and more and more of it. Like you can eat an entire potato chip bag and still feel a lack because your body didn't even recognize that it ate food. And then it blesses the body because he spoke that. He spoke a word of blessing on our food. That's his purpose, is to bless us. And then pleasure, and he desires that we receive pleasure, and but that's in the context of submission to him. So as we're taking pleasure for ourselves, we're not going to receive it as a good thing. So all the other criteria may be true, but if we're taking it out of context in our out of our relationship with him, then it's not going to bless the body the way it would if we're receiving it as a gift. And then acknowledging the gift. I think Hebrews 13:15 is where it says the fruit of lips who acknowledge his name. I don't remember the whole verse, but I noticed just as I paid attention to how I consumed, what I consumed, and the context in which I was consuming it, the natural fruit of the lips was giving thanks. And our family just repetitively just said, this is a good thing. And that was a declaration of like his identity, his blessing. And, thank you, Abba would come after, like all of my children. That is, it's a constant and repeating, not a habit. It's just it's a response to acknowledging, to seeing, identifying a good thing, something that's truly good, that's not lying to your body, is not trying to deceive you. It's offering the fullness, and it's a generously offered gift. And we just say, this is a good thing, or thank you, Abba. And there's just a lot of that happens just spontaneously,
Yeah.
And I noticed that it makes that Hebrews 13:15 feel so substantial, because of it is a natural fruit, a product of living in that light. Like you see a tree bearing fruit, and it's not trying to produce fruit, it's just putting it out because that's its response to the light and receiving what the Father's offering to that tree.
Yeah. Well, that is powerful. Nature, I think the last couple of weeks, it's just, weeding in the garden will kind of make you think about, I have these wild sunflowers. They're called cowpen daisies, but they kind of look like the sunflowers in Van Gogh's painting of the sunflowers. And, or is it Van Gogh? I don't know. I shouldn't quote art because I don't know art, but that vase of flowers with the sunflowers. Somebody correct me. But I've been fighting those in the garden, and one head is so prolific and makes hundreds of seeds. And if you don't get that out of there, you just gave birth to 100 more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want my finances to be like. So, but yeah, nature does teach us. He gave us creation to teach us, and there's a lot to learn from it. So, but if for some reason, if you just jumped into this, we encourage you to check out her book, Why We Eat, where she talks more detail about this topic, and pray about it yourself. You may be convicted about the things that we're eating in our Western diet, and many of us are waking up to the reality that this Western diet, it's not been a good one. And I'm sure that you would attest that you would agree with that, Karyn.
Yeah, sure. It's hard for me to say right now, just because at the beginning of my journey with food, it was a lot of judgment and a lot of condemnation towards people who honestly are just ignorant and have received something handed down. Like, all of us has received what that has been handed down to us. And I really believe that the Lord made me a curious person by nature, one who wants integrity by nature. Like those are characteristics that he trained me to perceive integrity and desire it. And so I want to be sensitive, but at the same time, like when people are being lied to or mistreated by the enemy because of just a lack of understanding, I want to do what I can to open eyes and try not to be dogmatic. It's hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely a tight rope to walk, because you can just dump all your seed out on someone, and then it just scares people away, and that's not the point. It's, I don't know. I think a lot of times we kind of forget that we came from that too. And so,
well, and you look at how Yeshua taught people, and how Yah through the story of the people in when he calls them out of Egypt, he doesn't give it to them all at once,
right?
They could not handle it. They could only handle little pieces at a time, and that's how we, that's how we are, and we have to remember that when we tell other people that, it's a little bit by little bit. You don't go too, and we get excited, and it's easy to get carried away.
Yeah, and
we've
I
all
think
done it.
Guilty.
We need to be careful. We don't deceive ourselves in thinking we've arrived.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
No. Yeah, that's very easy to do.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep. Did you have more slides?
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
good.
So we'll go on. So this slide in particular kind of talks about, what we just kind of talked about these foods that are sold to us as science. And it's really just a version of the lie that was told in the garden. And you kind of talked about that a little bit. And then there's I liked this quote, that anyone who attempts to sell health is a serpent oil salesman.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me more what you mean.
The forked tongue is something that he showed me not too long ago, and how it is just the serpent. The nature of the serpent is to separate us from our true master and protector. And I don't know where the phrase snake oil salesman came from, but I figured if I switched out and just said serpent, it would probably be like, oh, there's actually an enemy here. It's not just the salesman. It's not just the salesman, it's the enemy involved. The slippery, sneaky, double-tongued salesman, or the double-tongued serpent that's it's his agenda. So your friend who's trying to sell you a supplement may not realize that's the agenda, but at the same time, if we're buying health, like, it makes me think of the Simon the sorcerer, and how, like, I don't remember if it's Peter or Paul or somebody admonishes him, how dare you try to buy the gift of God with money. And so truly believing and affirming that health is a gift from the Most High, it's not something that you're going to buy in a bottle. It's just not. And even with all my pursuits of health, which was truly, I believe it's a pursuit of holiness, because holiness is being one and at rest in the presence of the Most High, and experiencing his approval.
Well, I think one can argue that the pursuit of health, the way many people do it, becomes a religion in itself.
Oh yeah.
And and I can't tell you, and you probably
and I've been there.
Yeah, I've known a lot of people through the years who ran, did marathons, and dropped dead of a heart attack in their 30s or something, and they seem to be the tip top of health. And
it's when you see that the Lord is it's the Lord is the what do you call it? I lost my word. The one who gives and takes life.
Yeah.
There's really no way around that.
And I think there is so much to the food, and it's just another lie that we've been sold and we bought from man, and we believe that somehow man could take something that Yah made perfect and process it and do some things, and it would be better. And it never works that way, does it?
No.
Nothing that man puts his hand on, it doesn't get better. So there was one that I really want to get to. So I liked what you said here about mental junk food creates the same kind of distress response as physical junk food. A simple palate of palate.
Sorry.
In the disease of addiction, how can we be both holy and have no effective discernment or dominion over appetite, no desire to hear any reproof from Abba that might take away our list of entitlements? Love isn't fake. Our Father has never inscribed or spoken untruth. And you kind of hit on that a minute ago, but explain this mental junk food.
So I'll notice when my children will eat a meal of, if they're at a party and they have a piece of cake, it'll be a minute before they're their normal selves again, just because their bodies are handling something that it's a burden, right? It's not easy for a child's brain to process that much sugar or any dye or whatever. But I also, as he was showing me my habits, using social media or whatever were causing the same effect in my brain, because I was responding very harshly to my children, or just not being fully present and consuming, so whether I'm scrolling on Facebook or he called it shadow abuse instead of substance abuse, because we're wanting a connection to others, or a feeling of fullness in our minds, and we start consuming information or gossip or whatever it is, and at the time it's pleasurable, but once you step away from that, your body and your mind are reeling from being separated from truth and what is of life. If you're walking through your garden and harvesting vegetables and giving thanks, there's a whole lot different mental response from that than it is to, sit in your house and entertain yourself for a while. It's
Yeah, it doesn't satisfy.
it's very
and you always
interesting.
need more.
Yeah. It's a type of consumption that it's really easy to fall into, because you're not eating, you don't think of it as eating, but it is, it affects your mind in the same way that food that isn't food will affect your body.
Yeah, and I think it's even though it's like real bad right now, I think with the screens everywhere, if you've seen the goggles that just came out, I mean, that's like a whole other level of constantly be in front of a screen. Your whole life is a screen. You can see the grooming into living by the screen, and it's designed to be
very
addictive.
Toxic.
Yeah.
I've seen a young child at a jump park who I remember when I first, we don't watch movies, but when my husband and I first got married, we watched a movie and I saw drug use for the first time, because we grew up very fundamentalist. So we didn't watch any movies, and we were very sheltered from anything having to do with drugs. And I felt so sick when I saw drug use for the first time. And when I saw this young, like, teenage girl, she kept getting on her phone, and the way that she acted was so similar to a drug addict. I was like, there's just no way that that's not true. It's 100% as addicting as drugs.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and I know you said you didn't watch TV, but there is a documentary about that goes into how the theory behind it basically was a Skinner box, and it was a dopamine reward, and all the technology and all the phones and all of those things are driven by those little dopamine hits, the likes and the dings and the comments, and that is like just like crack in your brain.
It's all designed to
And the book speaks to that too, because I've been in that that repetitive cycle of needing to go back and check, and it's still a battle. Like, I want to be present to connect with people online and not be fearful of the phone, but I also, it's still so easy to get stuck into a repeating pattern of the affirmation, the feeling, and not seeking the Father for that, what the fullness version of what you're looking for. Like, you're going to receive everything you need if you just enter the presence of the Father, and just say thank you for something, and be be a bride in love, just loving hearing from him and wanting his instructions to understand what he desires for that moment.
Yeah. Well, and I think when we immerse ourselves in the technology, whatever it may be, we are in essence, shunning him in that moment. In a lot of ways, we're like going, nah, done.
Yeah. I just had the same exact thought today, thinking about like, when I get on my phone and my children are in the room, like, you're telling them your presence doesn't matter to me. And that's exactly what you're telling the Father.
Yeah. And he's going to go, okay, well, I can see you're busy.
Yeah.
I'm gonna,
The metaphor that came to my mind at that time was like, how are you going to eat bread if your mouth is full of marshmallows?
Yeah, that's good. You could put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, I had a few more things that I wanted to hit on before we left. So,
So just you don't have to go back, but just to pointing back to the book, I think it's good that it's, why we eat isn't just about the food we intake. It's about what we put in our minds also. And I like that you go into those aspects of it also.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
good.
Well, I believe it's made to be like, that's the only, I believe that's the reason that we eat, is so that we can physically see and experience what he meant to do with the word. Like that's what we're made for, is the word, even over and above food. But food is so distracting to us that we're not receiving the substance.
Yeah, we've turned the shadow picture into the thing itself.
True.
It's like,
yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we've started worshiping the creation instead of the creator.
True.
Yeah, and people do it with nature, all kinds of things. Well, there's a section you write about the body, and you have this line here that says, "What you consume becomes what you are made of. The food you eat becomes the flesh and blood you're made of. This is the parable. The word becoming light, becoming good news as we taste and enjoy his goodness." And then you talk about the Hebrew word for flesh, basar, also means good news. I don't think I'd heard that before. Have you, Jake?
It's not familiar to me right now.
Yeah, I thought that was a very revealing. I didn't actually know that until this year, which is surprising because he taught me so much through the body, the way it responds to food, fitness training, submitting to the yoke of Messiah. He made parables out of the squat rack because that's something that I like to do, is lift weights. And like, you don't receive a tenacious faith by sitting on the sidelines or even showing up to the gym. And you receive it by submitting to the challenge and receiving strength from the tension. And the food side of that is that as we receive the word from the Father, direct, I know without really knowing all the science behind it, I know that the food that I receive from my garden is more full of energy than the food that I can buy from the store, just because of the time it's taken to get to me. Like I've heard of studies that say, it begins to lose life as soon as it's cut off from its source. And so the best you can receive is directly from the Father, as you submit to his word to cultivate food. And so, my desire is to do that, but even more so, I want the word that I receive and the words that I absorb into my being to be of truth and of life. And if I'm filling up my mind with, things that are not true and good and right, then, whether it's the most recent conspiracy or what they're saying about the virus, or, it could be news, it could be all sorts of things. That's also what's going to be a part of me. And that's what's going to come out of my mouth. That's what's going to inform my actions, and it's going to incite fears or...
Yeah, it's the same concept where Yeshua talks about out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and the same kind of principle. The thing that really caught me is I used to teach photosynthesis. I taught science for a long time, and I had to
tell
teach
me
this.
What my mistakes are.
and I know you nailed it, and
Okay.
you nailed about the food chain and the food web and how energy gets passed down, and the base level plants receive the most energy, the green plants and their little solar panels. And in fact, first off, it is absolutely amazing that these green plants can make glucose, and that they can do that just with sunlight, and that they all made them to do that. It's also baffling to me that we make all our solar panels black, because I'm like, I think they probably should be green, because that's what
a
the
good
leaves
point.
of the tree are.
That's a good
and
point.
so why didn't they make them green?
It's because whoever's making the solar panels never grew a squash plant before.
Yeah, found out how prolific they were. So
Let's see how big the solar panels on those are.
That's right. And there's something very, I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a very basic truth that we see in the plants about that direct conversion of energy from the sun, the SON, gets converted into the bread, and that anyway, I just thought you're really on to something there that I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter called The Light, and he showed me some things about photosynthesis that I was kind of blown away. And I was in the middle of writing the book, and I'm like, I never thought about this. Like, I'm gonna have to study what I'm talking about because I don't really know.
Yeah.
But the kidneys and how he says, I search the kidneys. Well, the kidneys are very responsible for how the body converts the sunlight into vitamin D, useful vitamin D. And so as we live in the light, as he is the light, that's what informs our minds and what we think about. And so those being cleansed by his light, and continuously processing the blood, there's so much rich parable in that light.
Well, and there's so much truth to that. And, during this worldwide event that we all know that happened, but we won't say what it is.
We all
but, some of the things that were said were basically, stay inside. And I kept going, this is wrong. We should be outside. If it really is this thing, then one of the cures is going to be outside and expose yourself to sunlight. It's going to help you. It's going to be a benefit. Just like you just said, said something about immersing yourself in his light or his word or something. But yeah.
Just like every single other, disease that has ever happened, sunlight's always usually better.
Yeah, it always helps. I liked your line here about we are sheep, we have a shepherd, and we possess discernment. And we raise Dorper sheep, and if you've been around sheep or raised sheep, you kind of understand that they need a shepherd, and left to their own vices, they don't make good decisions. But I like this part here about eat light-filled plants. I hadn't really thought about that, about that we eat light-filled plants, and I really liked how you said that, and that's a good one. That's going to stick with me. And before I forget, I do have this section that shows your website, and so if somebody wants to find out more about you, they can go to This Is a Good Thing. Is it .1?
Yeah.
And they can find this, and you've got recipes and all kinds of information. But Jake, I think you had another question.
Oh, yes. This is probably the most important question that you'll get. How can I get involved in the tree climbing championships?
Where did I mention that? I don't remember.
You didn't, but in my
a sleuth.
In my prolific research, I saw
they found you.
An awesome video on YouTube about climbing trees.
Did you find my husband?
Yes, it was amazing. And I was like, I need to be doing this.
Yeah.
I actually have a big tree I need to cut down, and probably next week. So
yeah, he started climbing when he was 14, and so that's just something his buddy and he kind of kept doing as they became more professional arborists. And it's a career. I think it's a fun and family friendly, very educational type of. I don't know. You could look it up on the ISA. I think is that the site. The ISA, you can look for your local chapter's tree climbing championship. When is the one in Texas? I don't know.
Yeah,
Not this year, probably.
I had never even heard about it. And then I loved climbing trees growing up, and I stumbled on that, and I was like, oh man, this is where it's at. And it did. It looked like a fun family event, and You go cheer
and
on,
it's useful.
you know.
It's not just like a sport. I'm not a huge fan of sports, but I love the community and that they're doing something fruitful.
Yeah.
Um,
But that was just an aside that I thought that was really neat, and I wanted to bring it up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Karyn, so we have, so you've been published. Tell us a little bit about Debarim Publishing, who decided to publish your work.
Sarah. So I asked Yah to show me who I needed to find because I, searching on my own, I was finding either secular or Christian, and knowing the nature of the book that I had that he told me to write, I could not imagine really that it would go over super well with Christianity, because he had shown me some of the Western traditions and the Greek origins, and I was just I didn't feel like Christian was going to work, but or at least that they would want to work with me. I don't know. So he showed me her. Actually, I think she might have approached me on Instagram somehow, like she liked a post. I don't know. I don't even know what it was, but I just instantly heard the name. I knew what it meant because I love words. I love words, and he has taught me so much just Hebrew out of my desire to understand him. And so I was just like, the word Debarim, and that had, it felt substantial. And so I sought her out and I called her, and I feel like I was only her fourth book, or maybe, I don't know. I knew that she wasn't, hadn't started. She was just getting started. And the verse that kept coming to mind was, he can save by many or by few. And like the things that like, he doesn't need strength or a mighty army, because he is the one.
Yeah.
So if it was supposed to go anywhere, it had nothing to do with me or her. It was him, and I felt like a kinship with her just because she's a mother, and the fact that I could email her anytime and tell her I made a mistake, can you help me fix this? That was really neat to have. She was easygoing and not, I don't know. She wasn't too professional. She wasn't too over my head to where I couldn't understand the process, but she helped me move through things that I was way, way too, I don't know, uneducated, I guess, about the process. Because honestly, I didn't research how to publish a book. He told me to write it 4 years ago, actually. And it took me that long to really take it seriously. So,
yeah. Well, that's awesome. She's a great publisher to work with. And if you have a story that Yah has laid on your heart, reach out to her and let her know. And she might be able to help you put that together. So it's Debarim Publishing, and she is fantastic to work with, and we just wanted to make sure people knew about that. And that, once again, the name of the book is Why We Eat, and it's by Karyn Dunavant. Is that right?
Dunavant. Yep.
Dunavant. So, and Karyn, we appreciate you taking time to be with us. Now, Jake, did you have something else, or is that all the questions you had?
That was all my questions. I ended with the most
Karyn,
important one.
do you have any questions? Do you have anything else you'd like to say at the end?
Yeah, maybe point out where everyone can find your book and purchase it. And
how do they buy
your
book?
That kind of thing.
So I know Sarah has it on her website, Debarim Publishing, and I know it's on Barnes and Noble. I kind of did a search myself today, so I know there's a few other pages that have it for sale. But I personally don't have copies to send out right now, so unless I order more, I'm not probably. I don't know. It's on my website, and I can order more.
Well, we would encourage everybody that was in earshot of this to consider buying the book, and maybe buying it for a friend and letting them read it. And we think you'll be blessed because the words that God has given her here are powerful, and you can tell that she's pretty smart and got a pretty good grasp of some Torah understanding, and in a short time she's picked this up. And so, that to me testifies that this is beyond her and beyond her brain, and this is the hand of Yah in her life. And she's been given some download material, and which is pretty awesome. So, and when those things are downloaded, you have this burning fire in your bones, and you have to do it. So we appreciate you being obedient to that and not stuffing it or ignoring it, and that you had the boldness and the courage to put these words down. And we know that's going to benefit a lot of people. So
I pray that it does.
Yeah. We appreciate your time and being willing to be on with us at Sabbath Lounge. And we just ask for Yah's continued blessing to be upon you and your family and your husband as he safely climbs trees.
All right. Thank you so much. And he bless you too.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Karyn, stay on the line. I'm going to end the recording, but we'll still see you. So hang on just a second. And for the rest of you, this is Matt
and Jake
signing out.
See ya.